Hey everybody, what's up? Just Ehren here, Question Period Canada. Pretty revved up. It's the beginning of a new week and Question Period is going to start very shortly, like in 5 to 7 minutes. We'll watch some of the banter, I guess. We've got a fresh new look, something that I'm trying, and let me know in the comments or let me know during the broadcast if you like the way that this looks or what you'd like to see. We're going to jump into the other program right away.
Rockers narrowly beat the Toronto Huskies 68-66. At the time, the Globe and Mail said Newman was considered one of the Dominion's great authorities on the sport. While the Huskies only played for one season, 2 of their players are now honored in the Canadian Basketball Hall of Fame. And in this house, we know Toronto continues to excel in the NBA. Ben Newman left a legacy of generosity and joy for his family and for St. Catharines and for all Canadian basketball fans. He's remembered by his wife Sheila, his daughter Francine, and his grandson Jordan, who continue to share his story. Newman will also be on this year's ballot as a builder of the game at the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame in Massachusetts. I hope his impact will be remembered here and throughout Canada.
The honourable member from York Simcoe.
Mr. Speaker, this Liberal NDP government has created a made-in-Canada housing crisis. Our country is now the least affordable housing market in the entire world. And the Prime Minister's costly policies have only made matters worse. Retirees are now living in laundry rooms. Millennials are living in their parents' basements. Students are living under bridges, and Canadians of all ages are having to choose between paying their rent or mortgage, putting food on the table, and heating their homes. Investing in a home of your own is about shelter, but it's also about independence, stability, and opportunities. These dreams used to be available and achievable for any Canadian, but not anymore. The Liberals have no real solutions to fix their made-in-Canada housing crisis. After 8 years, the chickens have come home to roost, or at least they would if they had a home.
If they had
Conservatives
home.
will build the homes, fix the budget, axe the tax, and stop the crime. Now let's go!
The honourable member from Niagara Falls.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this Liberal government has allowed catch-and-release criminals to cause chaos in our streets, resulting in car theft numbers unlike anything we've ever seen in the past. According to the Liberal government's own news release, auto thefts in Toronto are up 300% since 2015. And what happened in 2015? This Liberal government happened in 2015. This auto theft crisis has happened under their watch, and parts are full of stolen cars waiting to be shipped overseas.
It's nice to see you in real time.
Through increased insurance premiums. This Liberal NDP coalition and Prime Minister are not worth the cost. Change is needed, and only Conservatives will increase the mandatory minimum penalty for a third offence of motor vehicle theft, and we will repeal the catch-and-release rules in this government's Bill C-75 to ensure that repeat offenders get jail, not bail. A Conservative government will hit the brakes on car theft, protect the property of Canadians, and bring home safe streets. It's just common sense.
The honourable member from Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, while Loblaw's profits are at an all-time high, so are Canadian grocery bills. And who's working to keep it that way? The Leader of the Opposition's campaign manager and top political advisor. Last week we learned that Jenny Byrne, a senior Conservative advisor, is currently listed as an active lobbyist for Loblaws, all while she participates in Conservative caucus meetings and has daily calls with the Leader of the Opposition to set strategy. While Jenny Byrne has been profiting off the anti-competitive practices of Loblaws, the Leader of the Opposition has been profiting off her counsel on exploiting Canadians' anxieties over grocery prices. Now it all makes sense why Conservative MPs have been putting up roadblocks on legislation to combat predatory pricing and anti-competition practices. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we will keep working to combat high grocery prices despite the interests of Conservative insiders.
They say they're working towards like lowering grocery prices or stopping them increasing.
Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Show me any evidence of that. Any. The grocery store is a scary place, guys.
Across Northwest BC. These folks give a tremendous amount of their personal time, both training and responding to calls, and they do it for one reason, to protect their neighbors. I think it's one of the truest expressions of community that there is. I want to give a special tribute today to the volunteers of Terra Search and Rescue who responded to the tragic helicopter crash in our region on January 22nd, which claimed 4 lives. Their skilled response in difficult winter conditions was invaluable.
Let's get the likes going, guys.
Now, there's a small way we can recognize
if you enjoy the
volunteer
content, give us a
like
like.
this, and that is by increasing the income tax deduction for fire
it does
and
help.
search and rescue volunteers.
I'm just
from
trying to figure out this YouTube
to
stuff.
$10,000, and I'm proud to stand
We're catching
with my
on.
colleague,
Like, we're growing
the
a
member for
very
Courtenay,
great
Alberni, and our
community.
entire
Like, it's
caucus in
amazing how
supporting this
awesome
one
all the
important
people are
change.
that chime in on here and chat. Like, it's great.
The
We need to grow. We need to get the
Jean-Pierre.
word out there, though. There's
Mr.
like a
Speaker,
Canadian right beside you that
this
has
week,
no
the
idea
Canadian U18
that their
curling championships will
government is
begin.
corrupt.
And the
And if they
riding of
see
Jean-Pierre
it,
is represented in Ottawa.
they'll know.
Thanks to the
Like,
Kenogami
they just need to see
Porte à la
it.
France team.
I think,
They
like,
received
most
Curling
Canadians
Quebec's
aren't
title of
stupid.
Team of the Year for the 2021-22
That's what I
season.
think. And
And
if
this
they
year
if
will
they
be
knew, because
especially
I didn't
special
know, I didn't until I
for
started
the
watching.
member for
I
Lac
had no
Saint-Jean
idea.
and for me, because both
But
teams
now
representing
I
Quebec
know.
and Ottawa
Like,
in
and
this
I can make videos. I
competition
know how
come
to do
from
this
our
stuff.
beautiful
And
part of the country, which is also full
we're
of
going to
talent.
get the word out.
I'm very proud to see these young athletes representing Quebec
That's
here in
the
Ottawa.
whole point. Like,
And show
and
off
again,
their
I'm
great
not
talent in the
big
Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean
conservative
region.
guy or
I'd
anything
like
like
to
that. I've
conclude
never
by
voted
wishing them
conservative
all success.
federally ever. I don't think.
Julianne, Megan, Amy,
I will the next
Megan,
time, though.
and their coach
And-
Brandon. Congratulations.
We just need change. That is what we'll
honourable
all
member from King
agree on.
Vaughan.
This Trudeau government.
Bill C-234 is
Time to
asking
get
for
gone.
a carbon tax carve-out for farmers. The PBO has stated that this bill will save Canadian farmers $1 billion by 2030. That's right. By fighting to keep the carbon tax on farmers, Liberals are voting to keep grocery prices high. Everyone knows that when you tax a farmer who grows the food, the trucker who ships the food, the buyer who buys the food. The Liberal government
The
is sending
trickle-down
2
effect,
million
like,
people
it just happens.
per
Like,
month
that's
to food banks.
not
The
something
number
we
of people
can
eating
act
at
like
food
doesn't
banks
happen.
in Toronto today would fill the Rogers Centre 7 times. Seniors are the fastest growing users of food bank. The Liberal Environment Minister admitted in committee that he called 6 senators and pressured them to cut the bill. Liberals want to continue with their plan to quadruple the carbon tax on farmers from 14 to 61 cents a litre. Our Conservative amendment will reject the Senate changes and restore this bill to its original plan. Conservatives will axe the tax, build the home, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
Yeah, good.
The honourable member from Pickering.
I guess
Uxbridge.
there's a lot of crime
Mr.
across
Speaker,
country. I don't know much about that.
The
Oh my
Conservatives'
God.
top
Jennifer
advisor,
O'Connell's a
Jenny Byrne,
disaster.
is also a lobbyist for Loblaws. Maybe this explains why conservative
Kelly, what's
MPs
up?
have been blocking legislation to deal with
I'm doing
predatory
way better.
pricing.
Way better. Thank you.
6 liters and counting.
I don't think I
But
had
it's
COVID.
the
I said
same old
that I thought I had
Conservative
COVID.
Party who
I think it
promised
was.
to
I
stand
just
up
had
for
the flu.
Canadians, but in
That
reality,
happens.
they are making deals behind closed doors. to
Jennifer
help their
O'Connell will
wealthy
give you the
connected
flu.
friends.
This
Mr. Speaker, we know
Baby
these
Spice,
conservatives
like-
love a slogan, so here's one for Canadians to remember. The leader of the opposition will raise grocery prices in your home, in my home. They're
What
gonna
is she
pay
doing?
higher prices home, Mr. Speaker.
Oh my goodness. She did that. What? Come on. She's always talking like MAGA stuff, like such a
The Honourable Leader of the
distractor.
Opposition.
Like, oh Lord. Here we go.
It's
Question
expensive to vote
period.
for the Bloc, Mr. Speaker. The Bloc voted for
Let's
Liberal
go.
Bill C-75 to release car thieves the same day they're arrested. The Bloc also supported C-5, which allows criminals to serve their sentences at home. And these laws have increased car theft by 200% in Montreal and 300% in Toronto. Will the government reverse these policy decisions and replace them with some common sense policy to get rid of this awful problem? The Honourable Government House Leader.
The
Mr.
new
Speaker,
government house
the
leader is
opposition
a
leader
disaster.
is pretending to care about car theft. Last week, he
I never would have
pretended to
thought
care
that
about
you'd want
grocery
Green
prices.
Gold back, but
But, Mr. Speaker, we have found out that his campaign
McKinnon is
leader
like dead inside.
is a main lobbyist for Loblaws. This is what's going on behind closed doors within the Conservative Party. What did he promise his campaign leader? That's my question. The Honourable Opposition Leader. Well, to axe the tax. That's what I promised. We are also going to fix car theft problems. I announced a common sense plan today to put an end to sentences being served at home and also to put an end to automatically releasing car thieves on bail. 3 car thefts should lead to 3 years behind bars. Will the government stop the crime that it has caused? We have a common sense plan. The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader
Trudeau,
likes
Freeland,
to talk
so
about
it's just McKinnon.
clarity and common sense. So here's some questions for him. What did his
It'll end up
campaign
being
leader advise him regarding grocery prices and costs in Canada? And what did he promise her? Because his political career is all thanks to this person. So what did he promise her? She speaks to his party's caucus behind closed doors. What is she advising all of these Conservatives about the cost of living and about grocery prices in Canada? It's so hypocritical, Mr. Speaker.
What I promised was to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. The Prime Minister, with the support of the NDP, passed catch and release that allows career car thieves to be released the same day they are caught stealing cars, to have house arrest, and to have shorter sentences, many of which they serve in their living room watching Netflix. That has led to a 100% increase in car theft in Montreal and Ottawa, and a 300% increase in Toronto. Will they reverse these disastrous and reckless policies so that we can stop the crime?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, of course this government has a comprehensive plan on auto theft. It's interesting, though, the leader this week is pretending to care about food prices and about competition in the grocery sector. This week he's pretending to care about auto theft, Mr. Speaker, but we find out that his campaign manager, the woman to whom he owes the leadership of this party, is addressing he and his caucus and advising them on food prices. What is her advice, and what does he owe his campaign manager, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He hasn't had a lot of
The
practice
advice is
at
to
this,
axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost and not worth the crime. We now are paying $1 billion more in insurance premiums because he has led to a quadrupling of car thefts in Toronto. I have a common sense plan, which I rolled out today, to end house arrest and catch and release for career criminals and bring in 3 years of jail for 3 stolen cars. Will this government accept the common sense plan?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
I'm very happy that the Leader of the Opposition, after reading a government press release, has finally tuned into this issue. But a couple of clarifications. Mandatory minimums for auto theft for repeat offences already exist in the criminal code. So you're not changing something that already exists. Secondly, as an aggravating factor for an auto theft that occurs with organized crime, that's already on the books too. 718.2 of the criminal code, Mr. Leader of the Opposition.
That happens to be a lawyer.
Why don't we focus on things we can actually do, like getting tough with organized crime and anti-money laundering?
It's a joke. Verani is a joke, guys. Like, just saying, I've watched him enough to know that.
To mandatory minimums for car auto theft. And furthermore, the minister claimed that he brought in bail reform that would stop auto theft, only that their bail reform doesn't apply to auto theft. So he's got to read his own law before trumpeting it in the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, they've given us a 300% increase in auto theft in Toronto, a 300% increase in auto claims this year alone. That is their record. We have a common sense plan to stop the crime. Why won't they implement it today?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada.
Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition purports to be tough on crime. You know who I listen to about crime measures? Police officers. You know what they tell me, Mr. Speaker? They tell me that this isn't an individual crime. crime. This is backed by people who are organized criminals. How do we deal with that? We get tough on money laundering. When he's asking me to read the law, I'd ask him to read C-59. That has measures that deal with money laundering that you're voting against.
Before we continue with question period, for the second time, I'd like to remind members that all comments go through the chair. I remind the Honourable Minister that all members come through the chair as opposed to directly to another member of Parliament. L'honorable député de La Prairie.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie.
Greg Fergus has to go as well. Like a
Mr.
bunch
Speaker,
of
when it
Liberals
comes
have
to
to go.
asylum seekers, the Liberals are mocking Quebecers. The $470 million they've owed Quebecers since 2021 has not been repaid. What's more, this Liberal government is going to give Toronto $143 million to house future asylum seekers and only $100 million for the entire province of Quebec. It's just one injustice after another when it comes to asylum seekers. Ottawa isn't paying Quebec what it already owes Quebec, and for the future, it's not even giving Quebec its fair share. Enough is enough. The Liberals have mocked Quebecers long enough. Where is our $470 million? The Honourable Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Bloc Québécois feels that $70 million, $50 million, and $100 million are nothing. Well, this money is very significant and helpful for asylum seekers in Quebec. And as the member knows full well, we have good rapport with the government of Quebec. We will work with them responsibly. And the Quebec Finance Minister will be meeting our Finance Minister today. We'll continue to work well together.
Maybe I'm being hard on
the Honourable Member for La Prairie.
Goof, at least.
He's the only one who thinks the relationship is going well with the government of Quebec. You know, $143 million is going to Toronto to house future asylum seekers, but only $100 million for Quebec. Meanwhile, all of Quebec's requests are quite literally being ignored. There's been no repayment of the $470 million. There's no plan to share the cost of welcoming newcomers with the provinces. There are no visas for Mexicans, no acceleration of the processing of applicants' files, no work permits within an acceptable time frame. No one is listening or taking action when we call on the Liberals to do their job. They're always lecturing, but never doing any work. When are they going to get to work? The Honourable Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Minister. Well, they are being armchair managers, as they often do. We gave $50 million to Quebec with $100 million additional funding to house asylum seekers. And this year, the Bloc Québécois is cherry-picking its statistics, reaching all sorts of random conclusions. They're being armchair managers. Meanwhile, we will work with the government of Quebec to do the work that needs to be done to welcome asylum seekers. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
And Manulife Insurance teamed up to end the coverage or limit the coverage of 260 medications for Canadians. More profits for them and less coverage for Canadians. Well, they tried to do it. We fought back and they walked back the decision. But the Prime Minister has an opportunity now. They have an opportunity now to end this once and for all by bringing in pharmacare. This is something the Prime Minister has promised and broken that promise. The Liberals have promised and failed for 30 years. So what the Prime Minister has a choice. Will he choose to stop working for big pharma? Yes or no?
It's a good question. Like, I don't mean to make fun of the NDP so much that their points aren't relevant. It's just they're ineffective because the coalition, like
Canadians, and to make sure
Mark Holland's
that we
a clown.
have a competitive and fair environment in Canada. We're working together on pharmacare legislation. I look forward to continuing those conversations. And of course, Canada, by engaging in bulk purchasing, has seen a reduction of about $300 million in the cost of drugs for Canadians across this country, with many countries looking to how they can emulate that kind of practice to reduce drug prices in their countries. We're going to continue to do everything we can, Mr. Speaker.
He's full of it, right? Like,
the Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Choosing big pharma and Canadians keep paying the price.
Switch to French, though.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker.
See? Called it.
Liberals are talking about Loblaws and how the other party has ties to Loblaws, but they have ties with Loblaws. In fact, over the past years, they met with Loblaws 60 times.
He's a fake.
And they have received millions of dollars, or thousands of dollars, rather, from the Sobeys family.
I believe in the NDP, like what they stand for. Like, I believe in that.
When will Liberals stop governing for the Sobeys and Westons of this world?
MPs are stand like, and you can see the frustration because.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely
politics
essential
is
that we bring down
I guess,
the cost of living. And we need to improve
NDP
affordability.
party is letting Canadians down right now
we
with
work
this
with all
coalition
provinces and
NDP Liberal government. Like, come on.
Medication. bulk purchasing to bring down costs. Now, as for lobbying, that's a question for Jenny Burns, I'd say, Mr. Speaker.
From Calgary Forest Lawn.
This Liberal NDP government continues to scam Canadians with their carbon tax. They said it would reduce emissions.
Nice.
It didn't. They said Canadians would get more in these phony rebates, and they don't. And they plan to increase this carbon tax scam in April, making the cost of everything go up. As 2 million Canadians visit a food bank in a single month, a third of which are children. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Liberals stop their plans to increase the carbon tax scam on April the 1st, making the cost of gas, groceries and home heating even more expensive?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, I find it incredulous that the opposition is speaking about scams. When you think about the advice that they are giving Canadians to invest in volatile cryptocurrency, to fire the Governor of the Bank of Canada, one of Canada's foremost institutions, and to vote not once, not twice, but 120 times against supports for Canadians, including our armed forces and including Ukraine. That's the height of hypocrisy, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, we will continue to vote against all measures that makes Canadians' lives even harder and even more expensive every single time. Conservatives are on the side of Canadians who are having to go into food banks more than ever before and making the cost of gas, groceries and home heating more expensive because of their carbon tax scam. This Liberal NDP government is immune to the pain that they're causing on Canadians because they're always working for the Liberal insiders and consultants. Why don't they scrap the scam, pass the tax to bring down the cost of gas, groceries and home heating already?
The grocery prices are honestly. I got my heating bill like used to be $200. In 2 years now it's $420. Like, god damn.
But I will ask them in return, what is it that they would cut? Are they going to cut supports to Ukraine and the Canadian Armed Forces? Are they going to cut affordable housing, Mr. Speaker? Are they going to cut the Canada Child Benefit and $10 a day child care? Let's hear it.
Got a bad voice. Let's hear it. What are they going to cut? Let's just keep spending money. Let's just keep spending.
Question from the Honourable Member from Foothills.
Well, I'm very proud to say the first thing we'll cut is the Liberal NDP carbon tax.
Barlow is all right.
More affordable for Canadians, because Canadians are paying more for food than they ever have before, with 2 million people relying on a food bank every month. The Prime Minister's solution, let's make food even more expensive. On April 1st, they plan to increase the carbon tax by 23%, part of their plan to quadruple the carbon tax. Conservatives have a common sense bill, C-234, which will remove the carbon tax for farmers, making food more affordable for Canadians. Why will the Prime Minister not cancel his plan to increase the carbon tax on April 1st to ensure Canadians can feed their families?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it's rich coming from this opposition talking about food prices when we know that that member's campaign chair, campaign manager, senior advisor,
I don't like this guy at all.
the person that walks into their caucus every week and gives them advice is the chief lobbyist for Loblaws in this country, Canada's leading food retailer. Mr. Speaker, instead of talking about axe the tax, maybe they should axe the hacks.
Ooh.
The Honourable Member from Foothills.
I'll give him credit. He
Desperation
tried
from the
to bring
Liberals is incredible as they continue to avoid the real question. Canadian farmers should be applauded for their environmental accomplishments instead of being punished by the carbon taxes from these Liberals. Why? To produce a ton of canola in Saskatchewan is 67% lower than the carbon footprint of European wheat. You can transport wheat, Canadian wheat, 3.5 times around the world before it has the same global footprint of wheat grown in Europe. But the Prime Minister wants to punish farmers instead of rewarding them for their environmental stewardship. Why won't the Prime Minister cancel his carbon tax increase on farmers to make sure that we can grow food for Canadians?
Share this with somebody, because like Canadians just need to see it. Like, I didn't know either. That's why I'm doing this, like to share it with Canadians, like, so they see it.
To talk about freedom, but now he's showing every Canadian exactly the type of leader he is. He is showing Canadians what type of person he is. He is the one standing with the bullies. He is the one who's picked.
I'm just having a little
what's up?
Trouble hearing the Honourable Member.
How are you doing?
The Honourable Member has 15 seconds left on the clock. I'll ask all members to please. Order.
Order.
The Honourable Minister for
Greg
Workforce
Fergus has to
Development.
go.
Mr. Speaker, he is the one who's standing with the bullies. He is the one who is picking on vulnerable people, standing with Danielle Smith instead of defending the most vulnerable youth in our country. Mr. Speaker, he has shown Canadians who he is, and Canadians will not forget.
What?
The Honourable Member for Mégantic.
Greg Fergus is a real problem, though.
Today, the
Luke
costly
Berkhold
Bloc
is
Liberal
pretty good.
Coalition will have the opportunity to vote on a Conservative motion to cancel the April 1st carbon tax increase. 800,000 Quebecers are lining up at food banks every month. Meanwhile, the Bloc and the Liberals think that it's a good time and a good idea to raise taxes. What's worse, Bloc MPs want to radically increase the carbon tax, which has a direct impact on the cost of groceries in Quebec. Who will have the courage to vote against Bloc Liberal ideology this afternoon? Who will let more families keep more money in their pockets, and who will decrease food bank use? The Honourable Environment and Climate Change Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind my honour.
Sorry to lower the volume on the climate minister when he's speaking en français. I just want to say, like, we're growing a community here, and it's really fun to watch the politics. I don't mean to sound frustrated. It just is frustrating because I care about Canadians, and I feel like they're being deceived by this current Liberal government. Not all Liberal governments, just like I don't really have a side besides the grocery store purchaser. Like the people at the grocery store are my people. That's it. Anyways, we'll jump back in. I only mean to overspeak when maybe some of the translation is going on. How's your French? Mine's pretty good.
Funny, but it's not funny, Mr. Speaker, that 2 million Canadians are using food banks
Adam,
every month because they can no longer afford groceries, Mr. Speaker. Who will do the right thing this afternoon? The right thing, that is voting for the Conservative Party's motion to cancel the tax hike scheduled for April 1st. Who will have the courage to do the right thing?
It's going to be so bad on
Minister
April
of
1st,
Environment and
guys.
Climate Change.
April 1st is going to be terrible. Like,
Mr. Speaker,
and then the fallout.
people are watching us, and they don't understand
Hi,
why
Barry.
in
What's up?
2024, a party that wants to maybe form government still doesn't understand that climate change is real. In fact, last year, there was a 20% decrease
Pat.
in grain
What's up?
production due to drought. And drought in 2023 dropped grain production by 13%, Mr. Speaker. And over the course of the past decade, 200,000 farmers in Canada have experienced higher costs due to climate change. Why do the Conservatives want to let people pollute for free, Mr. Speaker? Before we go to the member for Mirabel for his question, I would encourage all members to wait their turn before asking their question. The honourable member for Mirabel. 41% increase in business bankruptcies last year, and 61% of those bankruptcies were in Quebec. Mr. Speaker, that is the biggest increase on record. And in the middle of all that, the federal government imposed the January 18th deadline for small and medium enterprises to repay the emergency account without penalty. In a Radio-Canada report, Trustee Stéphane Leblanc warned that insolvency cases have been on the rise for the past month. And it's obvious that the Liberals have just added $20,000 worth of debt to at-risk SMEs. Why not be more flexible with these businesses rather than trying to kill them off? The Honourable Minister of Small Businesses.
Oh, no.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada
she's
Emergency
one of the
Business
worst,
Account
too.
was created to keep businesses afloat throughout the pandemic and to allow them to get back on their feet. Over 80% of businesses have repaid their CEBA loans, and thus they get some loan forgiveness. We are also helping businesses with credit card loans so that they can keep more businesses and more money. The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Well, the Liberals brag that 80% of SMEs paid back their emergency account on time, but that's not good news because it means that 20% of SMEs are at risk of bankruptcy. These aren't multinationals we're talking about. These are small shops and restaurants in our neighbourhoods. In order to help them, the government needs to do three things. 1, study their cases on a case-by-case basis. 2, guarantee loans from financial institutions. And 3, reinstate the $20,000 subsidy. What is so hard about showing our local businesses a bit of flexibility? The Honourable Regional Development Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for the question. I would like to remind my colleague that that wasn't the first extension of the deadline. It was the second. We offered 2 extensions to businesses, and businesses were supported by the government. But if they cannot repay it, we will guarantee it for 3 years at an interest rate of 5%, which is $250 a month in repayment payments. Also, in Canada, we are looking to the future. I've just made announcements in Drummondville, in Sherbrooke, and in many regions in Quebec. We will continue to support businesses, and we will help them with what they need. The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Last week, I talked to a restaurant owner in Trois-Rivières. When he applied for the emergency account a few years ago, he couldn't have predicted that food inflation would increase by 10% every year. He couldn't have predicted that patronage would decline this much. Ahead of the January 18th deadline, he asked his bank for a loan to repay the federal government. The bank said no, because of the uncertainty in the restaurant businesses. Banks, they don't want the risk that the federal government would have to assume. So when he couldn't pay, the federal government demanded another $20,000. How many restaurants, just like his restaurant, the Liberals intend to close?
Doesn't have much to do with the rest of us. That's the one thing about the Bloc. I find them divisive that way, that nobody cares except
if the government hadn't been there to support these businesses would not have made it through the most significant pandemic this country has ever experienced. Now we need to look toward the future, Mr. Speaker. We need to support businesses deal with the challenges of the future. For example, the energy transition, Mr. Speaker, and also improved productivity to deal with labor shortages. On this side of the House, we will continue to support all businesses.
The Honourable Member from Lloydminster, Battleford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is costing Canadians more than they can afford. His punishing carbon tax is already driving up the cost of groceries, heating, and gas. And on April 1st, this NDP Liberal government wants to increase it once again. Conservatives introduced a common-sense motion to cancel the planned carbon tax hike that will cost them even more on gas, groceries, and home heating. Will the Liberals support our common-sense Conservative motion and cancel their April 1st carbon tax hike?
Hear, hear. Well done. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, we hear misleading rhetoric from the other side of the House. Folks in Canada know that 80% of Canadian families get more money back than they pay.
He's going to start wagging his finger at the end. He'll start wagging his finger. Wait and see.
In front of us. It is something that helps the poorest of Canadians, and in fact, what he wants to do is take away the rebate. He wants to take away from poor and modest income people money that actually help to pay for groceries, that help to pay for rent, that help to pay for transportation. Shame on you for trying to target those folks and benefit only the wealthy in Canada.
I'm starting to realize their idiosyncrasies.
I know that
I watch a lot of politics.
There are many things I must regret. I'm hoping that this is not one of them.
Man.
So I'd invite ministers to please make sure that the answers are directed through the chair.
Fergus is a real problem for not just
from Battleford,
that he's an idiot,
Mr.
but
Speaker,
he interrupts.
Can manipulate the facts all day long, but that's not going to change the painful reality that Canadians across this country are experiencing. Let's not forget that the PBO has said that Canadians will still be paying hundreds of dollars in carbon tax even after the rebate. Canadians who are already struggling to afford gas, groceries, and home heating cannot afford this NDP Liberal government's carbon tax increase. Will the Liberals show some compassion and cancel their April 1st carbon tax increase?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, if Conservatives are truly concerned about the price of
O'Connell's
groceries,
a joke.
why don't they just ask their top advisor to pick up the phone and talk to Loblaws, or perhaps the next time she goes to pick up her paycheck,
She's a riot. This chick is wild.
In our work to bring down lower grocery prices, to bring in more competition, and to get rid of predatory practices. Mr. Conservatives are truly concerned for Canadians, I know just the person they can have to give their buddies at Loblaws a call.
Oh man, Phoebe or like Baby Spice, whoever you want to call her.
The honourable member for
Jennifer
Boyce.
O'Connell is her name.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, Canadians have had enough of this government's inflationary policies and excessive taxes. The Bloc Québécois
She's always trying to
fully supports
inflame the
Liberals
audience.
when it comes to radically increasing the carbon tax. 2 million.
She talks about like maggot stuff like all the time, like that our Canadian Progressive Conservative Party is like far right wing, which they hardly are at all. They're like the Liberals used to be. Now they have these woke Liberals that are on some other kind of agenda, but like.
Coming from that side of the House today, Mr. Speaker.
She is the real blonde.
We have found out that the campaign manager, maybe that hasn't been translated into French yet for the member across the way, but in fact, the opposition's leader's spiritual leader is the chief lobbyist for the biggest grocery company, and they're trying to give us advice?
Well, Greg Fergus.
Order.
Comrades. Everybody behave.
Member from Wellington Halton Hills is an experienced member and a very respected member, and knows full well.
Kiss his ass, and then he's going to throw an insult in there,
knows full well that he should wait his term before he is able to address the House.
Watch a lot of politics.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Danielle Smith is denying trans kids their basic human rights by denying their access to life-saving health care. It's not the role of politicians to tell doctors how to treat patients. Meanwhile, this leader of the Conservative Party remains shamefully silent on attacks on trans rights. The hate and prejudice of some should never override the fundamental rights of others. Will this government commit to using the powers of the Canada Health Act to intervene in any denial of life-saving care for trans youth?
The Honourable
I don't know
Minister.
what I think about like trans
warm,
youth.
fuzzy video hiding daggers at my community in Alberta came out last week on social media. I have spent hours on the phone consoling people who are crying on the phone asking how we can stand up for the rights of 2 LGBTQ people in Alberta. Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue to work on this, and I have one message for Albertans and people across the country. Legal challenges notwithstanding, the one way we can stop this is to kill the bill before it gets to the legislature. So write to your UCP members, get fired up, mobilize, because kids' rights matter.
If you're calling Randy Bossino for support, you're in a lot of trouble. Like, imagine that's the guy you get.
Mr. Speaker, parents deserve affordable quality
It's
child care, and child care workers need livable wages. But the Liberals are letting the $10 a day child care program fail by not giving workers fair pay and benefits, leaving parents without child care spots. And Conservatives, they want for-profit child care. This means
I hate to interrupt the honourable member.
Oh my God!
Sometimes, colleagues, we can clearly hear the question, and sometimes we can't. This is one of the opportunities where the chair cannot hear the question. I ask all members, please, to keep your conversations private so I could hear the honourable member. Can the honourable member from Winnipeg Centre start a question again from the top?
What a waste of time! Like.
Mr. Speaker, parents deserve affordable quality childcare, and childcare workers need livable wages. But the Liberals are letting the $10 a day childcare program fail by not giving workers fair pay and benefits, leaving parents without childcare spots. And the Conservatives, they want for-profit childcare. This means higher fees for parents and lower wages for workers. Liberals and Conservatives don't care about care workers. When will the Liberals finally enforce livable wages and benefits for childcare workers so they can live in dignity?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Families and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our national child care program is making life more affordable for thousands of Canadian families, as is the Canada Child Benefit. We continue to work with the provinces and territories to ensure that the
rotten she
agreements
becomes. She seems sweet now, but she's just new to the Liberal cabinet.
Benefits for the essential caregivers that we all rely on for the childcare that our kids need. On this side of the House, we continue to do the hard work, and we continue to see the Conservatives oppose every step of the way.
They will spoil her, like they'll ruin her. Like she'll be a sourpuss. Like
8 years, this NDP
nice.
Liberal government, it pays to commit crime in Canada. Stolen cars now
Melissa,
cost Canadians over $1 billion a year in insurance rates. Car thefts are up 300% in Toronto. That's thanks to the catch and release legislation that turns violent offenders loose onto the streets, allowing them to commit more crime. When will they reverse their disastrous policies, put the bad guys in jail so that Canadians can keep their cars?
The Honourable Minister
they're kind of big on this auto theft thing.
A reminder that she represents a part of the Greater Toronto Area, as do I. What I hear from my constituents and people throughout the 905 is that they're concerned about criminality, and they applaud the fact that we took steps to ensure with bail reform that serious violent repeat offenders are being kept off our streets. The other thing they applaud is when we work hand in hand with the police to keep our communities safe. So when I'm standing with the Chief of the Durham Police and a progressive Conservative Premier and giving them $121 million to help with law enforcement, they're saying that's a step in the right direction, and there's more to come.
How much more money are you going to give them?
Before I go
like,
to the member of Thornhill's
there's
second
so
question,
much
I'd
money.
like
They
to
only
apologize to
talk
the member
about
for
how
Don
much
Valley
money
East,
they're
whose question I
spending.
skipped by mistake, but it's illogical to
what
go
is
with the
happening?
second question of the member from Thornhill. The Honourable Member.
Speaker, I don't know why we have to explain this to the Attorney General, but bail reform doesn't apply to auto theft. It's thanks to their policies that you can get arrested in the morning and go back to committing crimes in the evening. And if you happen to get sentenced, you can serve the sentence in the comfort of your own home while watching Netflix or even Disney+. That is Canada's justice system after 8 years of this Liberal NDP government. So when will this Liberal government listen to common sense Conservative policies, repeal the catch and release, the stay-at-home sentencing, and finally put offenders in jail where they belong?
That's right.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
I very much appreciate the interventions from the member opposite, but if we're going to talk about the criminal code, let's talk about the mandatory minimum that still exists for repeat auto theft offenders under 331.1 sub A. Let's talk about the fact that when you commit an auto theft crime and you're involved with organized criminality, that's already an aggravating factor on sentencing. Oh yes, that was 718.2 sub A sub 4. Please take note. The important piece is that we are bringing together stakeholders, auto industry, every actor that's involved in this system to ensure we tackle this at every dimension. That conversation is happening this week. It's too bad they won't be there for it.
Ronnie's just a jerk. Like,
the Honourable Member from Don Valley East.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to wish every member in this House a happy Black History Month. Speaker, February is a time where we can remind ourselves of the contribution of Black Canadians in this country, the contributions that go back hundreds of years to helping build a beautiful Canada. It's also a time for us to remind ourselves that there's still barriers that are in place that we have to remove. Can the Minister for Diversity, Inclusion and Persons with Disabilities please tell us more about Black History Month this month?
Bravo.
The Honourable Minister for Diversity and Inclusion.
Speaker, this year's theme for Black History Month is Black Excellence, a heritage to celebrate, a future to build. It's about telling the stories of thousands of incredible Black trailblazers who have made Canada the country it is today. It's about recognizing the resilience of Black Canadians in the face of injustice. It's about celebrating the fact, Mr. Speaker, that Black history is Canadian history, and our government will continue to be deliberate about investing directly into Black communities so that we can continue to build a more inclusive and equitable future for all Canadians. Happy Black History Month, everyone.
Go ahead.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years under this Prime Minister, auto theft has increased significantly in Canada and 59% in Quebec alone. The ports, the RCMP, CBSA, and the Criminal Code all fall under federal jurisdiction. Instead of taking action, the Liberal government is committing to hold a discussion about this. It's a waste of time. We already know that there are weak Liberal policies on crime, and they're responsible for this increase. Does the Prime Minister recognize that he alone is responsible for the increase in auto theft? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
We're on the same mindset, Ken.
The increase in auto theft affects us all and directly concerns
I
us.
think most Canadians think
we
like
have is that
like
organized
sensibly,
crime is connected with this kind
and
of
know
theft.
if they see this,
What we
they'd
have
be
on
like,
the table
oh,
here in the House of Commons is a bill
that guy right there, right now,
affects money
that guy's
laundering.
lying.
C-59 that the Conservatives are voting against. If they are really for fighting car theft, I would invite them
mistaken,
to change
but
their
like
decision
I don't trust
on this
Verani
vote.
like further
The
than I
honourable
could
member
throw
for
him.
Charlebourg
And I could probably only
Saint-Charles.
throw him like
Mr. Speaker, what
6
we know
feet.
at present
Like,
is this Prime Minister has made
I
Canada
could toss him,
number
I'm
one in
pretty sure.
terms of exports of stolen cars around the world. This morning, our leader
Just
proposed solutions to fix the harm caused by Liberal legislation. Among other things, we will discourage car theft by stopping house arrest and increasing prison sentences for these kinds of criminals. That's common sense, Mr. Speaker. Will the government commit to supporting our efforts to fight auto theft? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, as I have mentioned several times, the fact that there is a mandatory minimum penalty for car theft, it already exists in the criminal code. The fact that it is tied to organized crime, this can lead to a higher sentence. It's already set out in the criminal code. What's not in the criminal code is the fact that we must fight more to fight organized crime. But there is a bill which is here on the table in the House of Commons, and the Conservatives will vote against it. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. The Americans are continuing to unfairly attack our softwood lumber industry. Again, last Thursday, the U.S. officially announced
guys think about the block?
a nearly
Like-
14% hike in their illegal duties
Hi,
starting
Charlene.
next
What's up?
summer.
Good
Ottawa must
afternoon.
clearly stand up for Quebec
how are you
forests, but
today?
it will take more than just words
We
to
were
get
just
through the
going to
crisis.
discuss the Bloc
Ottawa
Québécois.
must absolutely offer a loan and loan guarantee program to match the
I don't
unjust
care for the
amounts
Bloc
being
at all.
taken
Like
by
I care about
Washington.
Quebec like I
Will
do any other
the
province.
government take up
like,
a proposal to
I live in
protect
Nova Scotia.
our
I care about
businesses
my
and
Atlantic
our
provinces.
workers?
I care. I used to live in
The
Alberta.
Honourable Minister
Like,
of International Trade.
I care about
my
Canadians.
honourable colleague
I think
for
we're all
that
similar,
important
but they
question.
have this
We
weird
have,
government in
consistently
Quebec.
stood up
which
and said that the tariffs against softwood
Mary Ing
lumber,
is an
particularly our very important
witch.
forestry sector, are unjustified and absolutely unwarranted. We have been working with the Americans to make sure that we are using the dispute settlement mechanism to make sure that there are panels who can actually look into this. We will always stand up for Canadian workers, the Canadian softwood lumber industry, the forestry sector, and I look forward to working with my honourable colleague to keep doing that. Thank you.
Have you guys ever seen Mary
Honourable
Ing when
Member
she's
for
on fire?
Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte.
Just
The time
saying,
for
she's
talk
a
has
problem.
passed. It will
just
take
in
loans
case
and
you
loan
didn't know.
guarantees to cover these illegal
Hi,
duties.
Sarah. What's up?
The CUSMA litigation process needs a better framework to prevent these dirty, dilatory tricks. We must call for a tax exemption for private forests, which have nothing to do with these allegations by the U.S., and we have to ensure that Washington recognizes that the Quebec forestry regime is compliant with the free trade regulations. We want to collaborate with the government, but it needs to take action. What is it waiting for? The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
I agree with my honourable colleague. Those tariffs are unwarranted, they're unjust. We need to keep standing up for Canadians, forestry workers, and the sector. I appreciate the suggestions coming from my honourable colleague, and I think what you have seen the government do time and time again is work in support of the sector, particularly through our trade commissioners, where we have helped Canadian forestry companies to expand and to diversify. We need to keep doing this, but I welcome the suggestions coming from my honourable colleague and look forward to working with him. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Like,
The Honourable Leader of the
Mary
Official
Ing
Opposition.
is
This Prime Minister is
trash.
not worth the cost
Just so
and
you
the
know.
crime.
Like, I'm calling it right here.
Auto
Mary Ing
theft
is
is up
trash.
300% in Toronto and 100% in Ottawa and Montreal in the last 8 years of his catch and release policies. But his minister says, oh, don't worry. There's already a mandatory jail time provision in 3331A of the Criminal Code. Yes, it's only for 6 months. Today we propose a mandatory 3 years for 3 cars stolen. Will they support this common sense change, yes or no?
Common sense, huh?
Minister of Justice.
Hard to come by common sense.
Thank the leader opposite for returning to the chamber and returning to this issue. It's an important one.
Oh
and
my
it's really important to
goodness.
understand the full complexity of the issue. This touches the auto industry. This touches our ports. This touches the criminal code. This touches the CBSA. What I would note for Canadians is that under that party's watch, when that member was actually a cabinet minister, frontier agencies like the CBSA were actually cut. So in terms of providing the resources to keep Canadians safe, it's an interesting record that they've got. I wouldn't be too proud defending it.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
His main criticism is that when we were in government, we delivered safe streets at a low cost. That's right, we spent less. There was less crime and less costs. That's a good thing. With them, you get more costs and more crime. So why won't they follow our common sense plan to bring down costs and crime by keeping repeat car theft criminals in jail now?
I'm going to just ask for all members, please, to make sure that they listen to the question that's being answered. I know they're experienced members. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, what we have on display again today is the hypocrisy of the Leader of the Opposition. This week, he pretends to care about auto theft. He's getting comprehensive answers from the Attorney General, Minister of Justice, on what we're doing. He just has empty slogans, and I'll give him some empty slogans. What does this member's campaign manager tell him about food prices? What does she tell him about her lobbying activities with Loblaws? He comes in here shouting slogans like axe the tax. He needs to axe the hacks.
Good on the Liberals for showing,
well, Mr.
because
Speaker,
I'd go hard at that too if I was the Liberals.
From the king of lobbying, Hill and Knowlton, which brought on a special national leader of financial communications, who is that member right there. Lobbyist over there.
Hey Brent, what's up?
From the fact that crime is raging out of control. Today I announced a common sense plan to end catch and release and house arrest for repeat car theft criminals. Will they adopt this common sense plan to stop the crime?
He was pretty wound up there. It's kind of fun. Well, McKinnon is going to put the fire out. McKinnon just seems like a loser to me. Like,
Order.
I'm just going to stand here until you heard the last thing I said. Like, he commands no respect.
Order. The Honourable Government House Leader.
It's pretty clear that the Conservatives are off their game today, Mr. Speaker. What has happened here is that their campaign manager, the woman who has contributed, to whom the Leader of the Opposition owes his job, has been exposed as the lead lobbyist for Loblaws, Canada's leading food retailer.
Old news.
Stephen.
Oh, he called him his name. Look, he screwed it up. He called him, but he screwed it up. Order. Mr. Speaker screwed up big time.
It's in everyone's interest that the Speaker be able to hear the questions and the answers which are being put forward in the House. I ask members to please restrain themselves so that I can do so. The Honourable Government House Leader has 13 seconds left on the clock.
Speaker's breaking
The
down.
Leader likes to ask specific questions, so I'll ask him. What's been the advice on food prices
Hey, Spiky,
given by his
what's up?
campaign manager? How much is she getting paid to do that? And what has he promised her? What does he owe this woman for her lobbying for Loblaws?
I don't know. McKinnon seems like he's full of it. I think. I don't know. They're all full of it. They're politicians, but like some are worse than others, right? Like, I think McKinnon might be worse than a lot of the other ones. What do you think he's reading about? Like, while his
The
button
Honourable
has
Member
been
from
pressed.
King's Hands.
over the weekend, Nova Scotia was hit with some of the worst snowfall amounts in recent memory. In Cape Breton Regional Municipality, over 100 centimeters of snow. The municipality has declared a local state of emergency. There are over 3,000 people without power, Mr. Speaker. There are communities that have been cut off, and there is a concern about people being able to have access to actually leave their homes.
I know
Can the
this
Minister
guy.
for Emergency
Actually
Preparedness
know him.
update this House on the work that he is doing alongside provincial, municipal, and members of this House to make sure that people are safe in Cape Breton and indeed all across Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for this question, and in fact, actually thank members of Parliament who kept me updated yesterday on this significant snowfall in Nova Scotia. We received a request for assistance from the Nova Scotian government late last night, something which I approved. I'm happy to report that search and rescue crews have been working all weekend. Snow clearing heavy equipment from Parks Canada have been made available, as well as transportation support from the Coast Guard, and our humanitarian workforce will provide additional support as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
After 8 years, it's clear that well-connected insiders have never had it as good as they do under this NDP Liberal government. The Arrive Scam Watchdog report found a made-for-insiders process for this $54 million spend where qualified companies were cut from contracts if they didn't have the right connections and experience. High-priced insiders got paid every time. This wasn't a bug in the system. It was a feature in a process designed to drive up costs and reward insiders. It's clear that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. The only explanation for this insider protection scheme is incompetence or corruption. So which is it?
Which is it? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I have to admit, when I was listening to the member opposite's question about insiders, collusion, corruption, I thought he was talking about their chief advisor.
Watch, she's going to try to red flag us or like gaslight us, guaranteed.
Mr. Speaker, isn't it interesting how they are blocking legislation to reduce grocery prices when it comes to our government's record on issues of Arrive Can? Mr. Speaker, all procurement policies must be followed. We have made this very clear. Any reporting of wrongdoing will come with consequences. Can the members opposite say the same for their own house?
The Honourable Member from Fort
Their
Saskatchewan.
baby spice or
Speaker,
whatever.
that response had absolutely nothing to do with the question.
That's right.
There is a sham
There
investigation.
it is. Good.
The government's
Good for you.
investigator admitted that he's not independent. His job depends on the government's pleasure. We have with the Arrive scam, when whistleblowers criticize the government, they're suspended without pay. When witnesses defend the government, they're protected. It's a $54 million Arrive sham. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost in spending or in corruption. After 8 years, why is this government continuing to protect their Arrive scam, Arrive sham insider friends?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said in this House time and time again, we expect all contracts to be issued following the rules and procedures set out. Mr. Speaker, CBSA is conducting audits, internal investigations. The police are being called in when necessary.
She's not using
and Mr.
paper.
Speaker, let me be very, very clear. Any reports of wrongdoing will come with consequences. The Arrive Can app was created at a time to keep Canadians safe, and we expect contracts to be issued following the rules.
The Honourable Member
Loser,
from Calgary,
right?
Midland-Port.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this Liberal
Nice.
NDP government
Koozie is
wouldn't know
awesome.
accountability if they were hit over the head with it. Today, the Government Operations Committee heard from the Border Services Agency's head of professional integrity. The lesson: this is a kangaroo court for the government to investigate its own department. Min Doan, the chief information officer during Arrive Can, has been accused of deleting key emails. But the investigator reports to the senior officials at the same department that bought Arrive Can. So will this coalition government hold those in charge accountable, or do they plan to hide the dirt like they usually do?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I like
to the
Koozie
Minister of
quite a
Public
bit.
Safety.
I find her entertaining.
Speaker, we have said time and
God,
time
Connell
again
again?
that we support the work that is being done at committee. The minister has instructed the president of CBSA that that, you know, she should be very clear and open with the committee on the work that they are doing. Mr. Speaker, they are providing, there is initial interim reports, there are more investigations happening, and Mr. Speaker, once again, we put in place the ArriveCan app to help Canadians during an extraordinary time, and we expect contracts to be fulfilled following all the rules and procurement practices.
Yeah. The honourable member from Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this week every MP in this House
Oh my God,
will have a
he's
chance
a
to
nut.
vote in
He's a nut.
solidarity with
Wait,
Ukraine by
it'll be
voting in
both the
favor of the
Ukraine.
Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement.
Freeze.
It's important to remember that the Ukrainian people are not just fighting for their own security, they're also fighting for our security, and we need to be fighting for them. Our government has been unequivocal in our support for Ukraine, but under this leader, Conservatives have abandoned for Ukraine. They voted against Operation Unifier, against military aid, and they've used their climate change denialism as an excuse to vote against this free trade agreement. Could the Minister of International Trade clarify the environmental provisions in this agreement and explain why it is so important that everyone vote in solidarity with Ukraine?
The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
I want to thank the member for Etobicoke Centre for his strong advocacy for his constituents and for Ukrainian Canadians. For months, this Conservative leader claimed that the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement would impose a price on pollution on Ukraine. Last week in this House, the member for Sarnia-Lambton confirmed that, in fact, Ukraine has had a price on pollution since 2011. I would say and ask the Conservatives, join everyone in this House, vote in support Ukraine, vote for the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. President Zelensky wants it. Canadians want it. Conservatives should support Ukraine.
I bet you Poiliev is going to strike back. I bet you Poiliev strikes back on the Ukraine today. That's my guess.
We've learned that the conservative housing strategy
if Poiliev gets back up, I bet you he defends the conservative stance about the Ukraine.
Now, neither of these things are relevant for rural Canada. In fact, in Northwest BC, we don't have transit hubs. We barely have public transit. People deserve affordable housing, but what mayors in my region tell me is that they can't build it without infrastructure, and here's where the Liberals come in. Why are communities having to wait so long to hear back about vital infrastructure grants?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Member talks about affordable housing. 500 applications are across the country and 30 deals completed thus far. That will continue, Mr. Speaker. And what do we see as a result of that? Adding to supply, which of course underpins the housing crisis in front of us. The housing crisis is ultimately a crisis in supply, and that's why we're working with municipalities, in particular mayors, which the Leader of the Opposition continues to denigrate, so that zoning changes can take place in return for federal dollars. That does happen, and more building happens. Duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, mid-rise apartments, all of that is a part of that, Mr. Speaker. I'll deal with the member after question period if he wishes to take up the concern.
The Honourable Member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all remember 2015 will be the last election under first past the post. Now, without access to a time machine, it's simply not possible anymore.
So we're not going to see Poiliev again, though.
But this House has an opportunity to reach out to disillusioned and frustrated Canadians who so desperately want fair voting. We have a chance to pass Motion 86 on Wednesday. Will the Prime Minister support this motion that allows a citizens' jury, our fellow citizens, to help him find the consensus he so desperately wants?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to Canadians' right to vote, this is a trusted system that Canadians, there must be consensus on. So, Mr. Speaker, while we are working with Canadians on how to ensure that every Canadian has more opportunities to be able to access their right to vote, I know Prop Committee is working hard on recommendations as well if the Conservatives will ever end their filibuster and get down to the real work of this Parliament to ensure that our democratic institutions are strong and accessibility to vote is also strong.
And so brings the end of the question period.
We're at the end of question period, guys. So we're out. That's the end of that. It was a really fun episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in and watching. We have a blast here. I have a lot of fun. I hope you guys do too. Like, see if we can do something here right in the middle. Yeah, I think we can. So, yeah, just a lot of fun doing this show, watching the politics, because the reason I watch the politics is because it keeps me like focused that there actually are things that are making the rest of the world happen. And again, you're not being broken on the municipal level or the provincial level, but on the federal level, that is where they get you. Like, again, your municipal tax, like, they'll take your house away if you don't pay that. And on a provincial level, really, there's not much. But on this federal level, they'll lock you up.
Are you thinking about writing a book
if you don't
to
listen,
become an author,
obey,
grow a business,
and everything
write
is
your
controlled
legacy?
that way?
I feel like most
I have
people
no
might
idea.
have some questions
Myself,
about
I'm a
how to do
libertarian,
that.
which
Hi,
means
I am
I
Morgan
think there
Gist
should be
McDonald. I
minimal
self-published
government.
my own book,
Pretty much
sold more than 15,000
municipalities.
copies,
That
built
would
a
be
business
it.
off the back of my book, and I show
That's
other
not
authors
the way
how
it
to
is.
do
We're stuck in
the
this
same. My
situation
authors have
with
been
these
traditionally published,
friggin'
hybrid
liberals
published,
that we
self-published with
currently have,
amazing
and they're a
successes,
disaster,
winning book
such
awards,
mess.
being featured
But,
in Vogue, Entrepreneur, New York Times,
we do have
even.
hope,
So
like,
the question is, what does it
of
really
improvement,
take
at
these
least.
days? And the problem is that so
maybe
much of the
that's gonna
information
be
out there
POILIEVRE with
talks about
majority
building a
conservative
following, getting an
government, like
author
in
platform,
2025,
even being a
like
celebrity
October's
before
when
you
the
publish a
election
book.
is supposed to
Most
be,
publishers are
or
going to
at the
tell you
latest
that you
date.
need a platform before
Why
you can
doesn't the
publish a book. A
NDP
platform
do
of like
something about
100,000
that,
email
like
subscribers,
push
or
the
Twitter, or
election
Facebook,
further,
or
like,
Instagram, or whatever
like,
the
to
social media
advance,
platform
like,
of the day
happen
is.
more
The
quickly?
truth is
I
that
don't
they
know.
just want you to have a
I
platform so
think
that they
JAGMEET
can sell
maybe
books and make
sold
money
out.
off of your books. The
I don't
truth
know.
is you
It
don't
seems
need a
to me
platform
like
in
a
order
lot
to
of the
sell books.
MPs
Even
in
to
the
sell lots
NDP
of books,
caucus
thousands
that
of
are
books,
members
tens of
of
thousands
the
of
House
books. That is my journey. That is
are
the journey that I've
frustrated
walked
and
with
do want
hundreds of
change.
authors, and
I
I
don't
want to
know.
show you
Maybe
how
it's going to
this
happen
works.
overnight.
How do you use
We'll see
a
what
book
happens
to
April 1st.
build
That's
your
going to be a
platform?
day of
This works for
reckoning.
new authors,
Like,
debut authors,
once
people
we
with
feel
not a
the
whole lot of
impact, and
following.
then
We're
the
not
following
celebrities.
weeks,
You
like
and
the
me, we're
fallout,
normal
the
folks. This
prices
works for
of
people
everything are
just
going
like
to
you and me. So the
skyrocket.
good news is I have a
Like,
workshop that deep
again,
dives
I work in
into this
logistics.
process of
Professionally,
creating a
I'm a
best-selling book. All you
professional
have to do is go
logistician.
to
Like,
the link next to this
and
video, click that link,
I
enter
know
your
about
email address,
planning,
and you'll be able
this
to watch
is not
that video
a good plan.
right away.
The
Now,
fallout of
why
this
am
is
I
going to be
asking for an email
dramatic.
address? These are
Anyhow,
the secrets. These
we're
are the
getting out of that
insider
logistics
secrets
business,
to
and we're
what
going to
this
focus
next
on this
generation of
channel,
successful
trying to
authors is
entertain
doing
people
right
and
here,
get
right now, today. For
the
that
word
reason,
out
we're
there about
asking
Canadian
for an email
politics.
address
Because,
just to make sure that the
again,
information
I
is getting
didn't
into
know
your hands, that you
that
know
it
how to
was
use
the
it,
federal
and that we're
government's
available
fault what was
to help
happening
with
to
any
me
questions
until I
you
started
have
looking
following
into
that
it.
workshop. So
At
go
the
to the
same
link
time,
next
I
to this
started
video,
this channel.
put in your
Now
email
I just
address,
want
let
to
us know
share
if you
the
have any
message.
questions,
I'm not
and
on
I
the
will see
side
you
of
on the other
anybody
side.
except the
Bye.
people at the grocery store. They're my people. I'm just a good old Canadian boy, like from a very small community in rural Nova Scotia. I'm from a village of 300 people, like, and people, like, I still don't lock my car. I live in Halifax, but we're just trustworthy, but we're not foolish. Like, I was well educated, but for a long time, this government did dupe me. Like, for a few years, then I cut on, and now we're doing this. Anyhow, my name is Ehren. This is Question Period Canada. We have fun here all the time with Canadian politics. Like, we're growing a community of like-minded people that just want change. Some people are right-wing, and but we all just want change, and we're being reasonable about how we acquire that.
I'm going to make a bold statement and say that doing a TEDx talk is going to be the most transformative and uplifting experience of your life and your business. This is Kevin. Before his TEDx talk, when I met him, he was 19 years old, and just dropped out of high school, battling mental health issues, really hoped to one day write a book, and was an aspiring speaker. After helping him land his TEDx talk, he has now landed over 300 paid notified, all that He's landed a six-figure book deal with the world's largest publisher. He's helped raise millions of dollars
put out a couple of videos this evening, and always pay attention for the shorts. They're kind of fun.
Full time.
Thanks
and
for
this
watching,
is Cynthia.
Everybody.
Before she did her
Stay
TEDx
warm.
talk, when we got
Have something
connected,
healthy
she was
to
a nurse
eat.
practitioner.